All right, everybody, this is SIG Architecture for May 2nd, 2024. Let's get started. We have one item on the agenda here. And so Mo, take it away.
Hey, so see, I think Micah's on the call with me too. So, obviously, this is a topic of interest to SRC. But personally for myself, folks inside of Microsoft have sort of reached out to me and asked, in upstream Kubernetes and the larger CNCF ecosystem, are we doing anything about the type of attacks that the XC stuff sort of made very public? Um, and so while I'm not necessarily suggesting any changes, nor do I necessarily have any good recommendations, I just wanted to speak with folks and just to, just in case folks aren't familiar, with the XC attack, it was a supply chain attack where an individual or set of individuals had become a trusted maintainer and had used that access over a long period of time to inject binary payloads that were malicious, and then they combined that with an extra script that was only in the released artifacts that would then execute those binary artifacts, and then in certain distributions that would get linked into SSH and allow for a backdoor to be invoked using a custom certificate that was signed by a CA that was under the control of the attacker. So this is, incredibly sophisticated attack, almost certainly a bunch of people working together, almost certainly nation state type actor. At least, you can't pay someone for years to basically mess with a thing and, not expect some serious backing. So yeah, I don't necessarily have much more than that other than just to, ask people's thoughts and, have you changed anything maybe downstream? Have you considered any actions to propose upstream or anything like that? John, I see your hand.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have anything also actionable, but I guess I would just raise the question. I think that one we should, I don't know if SRC is or is talking to like Contribex on what we can do for our contributors. And we do, because we have these face-to-face meetings. I mean, it makes it a little harder to hide. I mean, I think the culture that we turn on our video helps. Like, we actually know people, although people could fake all of that. It's just, higher bar. I'm more worried about all the dependencies, and so I'm curious about what Dims and others on that. Like that's our supply chain. I'm more worried about even than our specific contributors. So
yeah,
that's
so the way I've been thinking about this is there are three phases. One is the trust phase, right? Like where we are giving people org access and giving people approver, reviewer rights and things like that. I think we are relatively not too bad since we already started pruning people off if they're not around and doing some cleanups and having a higher bar over who gets org access and things like that. So that's reasonably safe, but recently we there was a policy change where we were telling folks that look, you need to have an entry in Git DM and make sure that you have an email address that works and those kinds of things. So that might help. Then there was one more thing that we were debating around, hey, you need to sign your commits. That could also help. All these are like little things that could help, but obviously there's no foolproof stuff there. So that is not the first bucket. The second bucket is the dependencies itself, which we've been working on forever now, like in the code organization, trying to prune all the things and make sure that we are using correct tags. make sure that we are watching for stale repositories and people taking over GitHub orgs, and like making sure that whatever we are shipping, we have a good clear visibility over when we merge new things, and reducing the number of dependencies, and like both indirect and direct, and making sure that we are watching what gets into the vendor. So those are all good practices that we started way back even before XZ, and we have to continue to do that, right? And I have a PR for removing a whole bunch of things, and we cleaned out all the cloud provider stuff. The last one is remaining, so there's a PR open for that as well. So that is good. That's good stuff in terms of like making sure that we see what is going, like for example Jordan and like Tim Hawkin, and like this thorough review about things that go in to our vendor tree. And like I'm really glad that we have a vendor tree, because we can see what is going in, right? Like as opposed to a lot of projects where there is no vendor tree and like you have no idea what is happening and like what gets pulled in, right? So that's the second bucket. The third bucket is the release team and how it does it work, right? So there is a whole bunch of automation where we can literally replace one release manager with another release manager and like continue the process. And like everything is automated, right? Like there is very minimal touch points where the release teams have to actually go touch any of the artifacts or things like that. So that reduces any issues with tampering post fact, right? So between these three different buckets, we are trying to manage the risk. Obviously, we can do more if more people have additional ideas. Like we are open to dealing any of the things that I mentioned before, or like coming up with like new things. We also have SNCC and other scanning that we have switched on, but those always end up coming later, right? Like once the something has been found, and then people add it to the SNCC, and then SNCC does the scanning. So that comes very late. So we have to be very vigilant way before that for sure. I'll stop now, unless anybody has a direct question for me.
I have one quick thought in sort of relation to what you said a little bit, and what about like GitDM, and what John had said about sort of face to face. I think the bar for like people to contribute to Cube is already very high. And so I'm very wary of like increasing it even further. But at the same time, like the security person in me is like, yeah, I really want to like specifically know who's committing, and make sure all the commits are signed, and I can tie it to like that person. So like
Right.
like I have like two like opposing perspectives on the whole thing, right?
I'm with you like 100%. And there was this guidance that came from the sister organization in LF with respect to security, and the TOC ended up forwarding that email to everybody, all the maintainers, to say that, look, here is a set of guidelines we got from them, so we would like you to follow them as well. And when that went out, my first instinct to Emily was, Emily, let's make sure that people don't construct a big wall. And if there is a big wall, then we're going to lose contributors, right? So I had the exact same thought more.
I think Micah was before me.
Next, yeah, I share the same concerns as Mo, and I more speak from just as a security professional than a SRC role, because SRC is more on the reactive end than on the preventative end here. But I think I do think we have good processes in place. I think the one area that I've seen us not be as consistent maybe is in pruning membership. or inactive members. Like I know there was a push sometime in the last year or something.
We do it once a year, Micah.
Okay, we
don't
do it once a year now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think was it prior? Did we do one? Have we done one prior to last year, or is that like a first one?
No, we've done like
Okay.
2 or 3 so far.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's good. It's hard as an open source project too. We're having this conversation in the open, and that's good, and we should. But there's also because the project is so open, that is in some ways a vulnerability, right? But I personally, I don't have I'm not as close as other folks here to the day-to-day development process of on the upstream side. And I think that's from my comfort level, I'm pretty comfortable with where we're at. The parts that I don't know are the again, as we already said, we have pretty trusted people in high, high trust places, but we're not a company here that has stakeholders that are driving us towards compliance, or we don't have a funded security team or funded security processes that drive that. We don't have a compliance that we have to meet, which for a project open source software project, that's good. That's not needed, but it does make it harder for us to mandate certain controls in place, right? Like we do have GitHub 2-factor auth. That's great. I don't know what the status is of all our, cloud accounts and who has access to all those things. And do we have logs of all that access? Like just those sort of security, vegetables that you need to eat all the time. Like those are not necessarily things that are going to be in a README that are in a public repo, everywhere. Like obviously the access to that is going to be might be somewhere, but all those configurations might not be. So to me, those are sort of the dark parts of our process that seem the most vulnerable to me.
Yeah, like 2 things to call out there, Micah, is one is the GitHub management, and the team is doing a good job there now. We were tracking down credentials for a robot or something like that, and like, okay, we got to do something better here. So the second one is the Kate's infra side, where a few of us have trusted access, and there is some audit logs in there on what we do definitely on the Google infrastructure side. We have to replicate that on the AWS side right now.
Yeah, I was going to point that out actually. But I have a bunch of follow-ups to Dim's comment, but specifically about the infra and the audit logs. We are in a pretty good place for that on GCP. You can see who has what IAM roles and who are in those groups in the Kate's infra repo, and that's regularly dumped. For example, AWS or any of our other infrastructure presence, we don't have anything like that. It's not replicable. We'll have to do something bespoke for each cloud. It's really hard to stamp this out, and we don't have that investment on any of our other vendors like Fastly, AWS, DigitalOcean, that sort of thing. So like we have put some effort into this, but it's not enough. There's also things where we haven't quite moved stuff. I can tell you the Kubernetes release bucket still has a bunch of random people that can push direct to it, and hopefully locking that down this year by moving it to one of those like publicly managed ones. But there's some like legacy gaps like that aren't quite closed yet.
Yeah. Just not having all the controls in cloud environments, and maybe it's fairly easy because we have one sort of throat to choke in terms of someone who's an admin on the account. In the GitHub side, it's a little harder. Like I'm thinking of an issue we had that was reported to SRC where a Kubernetes org member had a GitHub access token that was leaked. And we couldn't get that, like we couldn't get GitHub to revoke it. The user had to revoke it.
Yeah.
Even though they're a member of the org. Like, yeah, it's those sort of like darker less touched parts that are not as hardened.
To Dims's earlier point, for example, the cloud providers, yes, we got rid of a lot of dependencies in KK, but we actually swept all of the dependencies out to the out of tree providers. and we are not replicating all of the policies and practices like having a vendor review team and stuff. And while we can kind of ignore that, if you think of Kubernetes, as an ecosystem, we're not doing very good on that. The main repo is pretty solid. There are a handful of people that can actually approve vendor changes, a handful more people that doesn't quite work properly, but like review. And we're pretty stringent about this. We should probably write a little bit more down for new folks to help explain what's the sort of thing you should be keeping your eye out for, like sketchy init functions and whatnot.
Actually, and that's what I was going to jump in and say. Like we do have that written down. We talk specifically about like init functions and like resident stuff, and so signal boost, yeah, probably. But those, I'm pretty happy with our processes in Kubernetes.
Right.
Replicating that out to the long tail of stuff, it
Yeah.
takes so much effort to do that, and so replicating that, it's like, hey, people barely keeping afloat, running out of tree secondary repos. How about a lot more work?
And a bunch of those repos are still really critical to running real clusters, or our infrastructure. I was thinking about this. We're not using vendor for most new projects. It's just kind of a bit of friction in Go. It's not really how things are set up. And so, like for example, the Kubernetes registry, like we depend on the Go module proxy. We're not using vendor. And we keep the dependency set small, but we're not actually reading those steps. We've also done a lot of work though in other areas like the container images. We pretty much only pull from things we're actually hosting ourselves directly. They might have originated somewhere else, but then we've like built our own image and made a copy. And we, in most places, really trim that too. Like we're doing something like distroless and we've really minimized the dependency set. And we're pinning things a lot, but again, it's not consistent throughout even just within our own organization. There's a lot of gaps, that sort of thing. I also want to point out, we're talking about all these like bars and things, but the other problem on XC was they attacked the existing maintainers to pressure them into like reducing the bar and adding people. Even if we have all this stuff in place, I think one of the important things we're doing is when Tim and Dims give a talk about people being jerks in open source and how like, this is not what it should be like, and how to deal with it, maintaining the culture where our maintainers don't feel the pressure from this sort of thing. If someone comes and starts trolling them that you're not moving fast enough, you need to get out of the way and make me a maintainer, like not letting that happen. We have some of that in place by you have to be an org member anyhow, but I think that like part of that's just culture, making people feel comfortable that like, sure, people can't get to everything and we should try to do better, but you should not get gaslit into handing over control of something.
Tim Alclair.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on this. When I was working more in security, this was the sort of problem that kept me up at night and feels a little hopeless sometimes. Let's see, I have a couple points I want to make. We talked a bit about trusting our members and good processes for membership in the org. I think, yes, we're doing the right things there, but that's not something we can depend on since a compromised account, a compromised workstation can always be a backdoor. We've got a lot of people in the org and can't rely on their like personal security practices. We talked a little about reviews for like relying on that to catch some of these things. The XZ attack used some like really clever approaches to hide the attack in test data, which was pretty interesting. And I don't think that would have been caught in a review. Things like discouraging init functions. We can kind of encourage that of our members, but I feel like really we should be relying more on static analysis, leaning more heavily on that for anything that like any policies that we really want to push, we need, I think we need to kind of codify that a little more, especially as we start getting into like non-core repos, which I think historically have gotten a lot less attention. I know on the SRC, like we never really knew what to do with random, SIG project that none of us had ever heard of before. And so I think kind of thinking about if there's ways that we can raise the bar on some of those things.
The
And
test data thing, just as an aside, like for Go, when you're vendoring, test data doesn't get vendored, which is super nice. Like it's not even present. And there have been a couple times when someone like did something weird, like they put their data in a folder where it did get vendored and it stuck out like a sore thumb. They're like, hey, this is weird. Can you like go put this under test data so it doesn't get pulled in? Like sort of for hygiene reasons, but it just stood out like very, very much. I will say like the flip side, like generated protobuf is like Go's version of binary test data. It's like, I don't know, like here's a, half megabyte hex string. Like, I guess this is generated proto. Sure. So we have our own sort of places where you would put stuff if you were looking to hide it.
yeah, I wasn't saying that like that is the specific technique we should focus on. I just think like, an attack of this scale, like there's some pretty clever ideas on.
I mean, like minimizing the places where opaque, uninspectable data can come in, I think is the general takeaway. And some of those we're in good shape on, some of those we could improve. So maybe that's an area to like try to see if we can improve.
Yeah. That feeds into the next point I wanted to make, which is asking, I know the code organization, is that a working group or sub-project?
Sub-project.
Kind of thinking about a lot of these ideas. I'm wondering if, I don't know if there's enough like interest across the org, but if like a kind of focused working group to try and look at all of these different ideas and projects and try and prioritize them and like kind of tackle this a little more systematically would be useful. And then kind of a related thought, if the next time we do a security audit, kind of if we can get a little more focus on our supply chain and build processes, if that's something that we could kind of push for specifically.
And the infrastructure.
Yeah.
Tim, at this point, we need hands. We don't have enough hands. We have lot of ideas. That's the problem, right? Like in general.
Yeah.
So we are trying to do the best we can with the people we have and the time and effort that we have, but definitely boatload of stuff that we should be doing and we could be doing.
We do have some rule to roll out like processes, automation, and requirements across sub projects, though. Like anything that's automatable. If you wanted to say, if we wanted to declare that every Go project must use vendor, like that's probably feasible to actually automatically enforce if we thought that that would actually help. I'm not sure it does because you need people reviewing it anyhow. But like I do think we have some room to say, instead of these being this is the Kubernetes dependency review guidelines, here's how to do it. I actually have on my backlog that maybe one of y'all wants to take up. We should be talking to the Go community at large about this. I think there's so many projects using Go modules, and I find it really challenging to review the updates to those. It's possible, but I'm like manually constructing a diff URL for the other repo between what happened since the last version. It seems like there's a tooling gap there. If you don't just go all in on vendor, it's super difficult to get visibility into your dependencies, and that problem is bigger than us. I think if we can attack some of those sorts of things that people have bandwidth, then that's where you can get it to multiply out to all the projects versus we're not realistically actually going to staff like the code organization group at like working on this problem directly in each sub project. We have like 400 repos.
I'm not seeing more hands. Do we have any other thoughts, comments? Bo, do you want to wrap it up, or what do you want to do? It sounds like we don't have action items. We have a lot of worry.
Come to code organization. We'll
Yeah,
start
come to
there.
code organization, come to Kate's Infra. I mean, like I said, we still have some stupid gaps that we should be able to lock down, but when it comes to that versus just keeping things operational, it's hard to even keep after the keeping things operational. That applies to, like, I think code organization and infra. This stuff is operating on the margin.
Right.
And
On field.
I don't want to go into all the gaps there in our public call, but if someone wants to talk privately sometime, I have a list of like, these are all of the gaps where you could just bypass all of this and own everything, and where we're not really doing enough there. I don't really want to air that out and just say,
That's
here's
reasonable.
the bullseye.
So can I ask who, like the way to get stuff done, right, is for somebody to be accountable. Like, we have this problem split now across multiple groups. Do we think this is a significant enough concern that there should be somebody who volunteers to take a lead on this and talk to Kate's Infra, talk to code organization, talk to Contribex about how we add contributors, look at our overall processes, both community and technical, and release, and code and release, all the technical ones, and run that ship, right? Like run that program. I don't have the bandwidth to do that.
Can we punt it up to
Somebody who
steering?
wants, what's that, James?
Can we punt it up to steering?
Yes, that's a perfect question. Yes.
With my
Or
same
Aaron.
thing, I was going to ask that, Micah. Is that a SIG security thing? I need to review their charter.
Can we start by writing down what John just said and like capturing that as a gap or a need, and then shopping it to SIG security.
Who's responsible for that?
Like I can write down what you just said, or you can write down what you just said. Like take it out of the recording or the notes, and then broadcast it to like steering or SIG security, or like say here's a gap. Is this in your wheelhouse? Is there someone interested? It sounds kind of like SIG security, maybe like coordination of like practices, maybe, I don't know, but at least capturing it is a good first step to say, here's a thing that isn't being done holistically. We kind of have bits and pieces, some of which are in good shape, some of which we know are not in good shape.
Send it to both.
That's fine. I can write out an email and send it to SIG security and steering and get the ball rolling.
You can. I'm telling you, like, we don't have like magic funding for these kinds of things. The spoiler is who's responsible for this? It's us, the people that showed up to be concerned about this.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen otherwise. I mean, maybe a few people can go pull some strings and get some head count thrown at this, but I kind of doubt it.
Yeah, I agree with you. At this point, it seems like it's going to be difficult to rustle up more people with enough knowledge and enough trust to go do the things that we need to get done. That's that's going to be a basic.
Well, I mean, right? The CNCF funds security audits, like if this will be a decision for steering and maybe for I don't know, CNCF governing board, like, is this something they want to fund? Is the risk high enough? But we should raise it to that level for their awareness and let them make the decision.
Right.
The thing is, like, security audit gives us suggestions. I think we know from here, like, there are what are things that we should be improving. The problem is driving the outcomes. Like, even when we fund the security audit, that doesn't fund the work to address the gaps. And what we're really talking about here is we want people to work on addressing it. It's not super hard to come up with what's a list of possible vectors where we should do better. A couple of us could do that and some spare moments. The bigger problem is, how do you get people to fix those. And I mean, coming from the trusting again, it's not going to be very easy to just throw someone new at that.
And on a continuous basis, right? Like that's the other problem, right? Like if you say vendor directory, then they have to keep doing it and not let the foot off the pedal. So unless we automate it somehow.
Okay, well, I'll take the action item to send the email. That's that, and we'll let other people decide. If you've been in more than a few meetings with me, you know I like that when the agenda's over to just end the meeting. So if there's anybody, I'm happy to allow somebody to raise another topic if they want. We have plenty of time left, but if we're done with this topic and nobody has other topics, let's go do other things.
When do we get to hear about Tim Hawkins' calcification? I was actually very interested in that topic.
I don't know, man.
My bad. I have to
He's here, right?
find a time to. Yeah, I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry. I have to find time to figure out what I actually really want to talk about. I mean, we could ad hoc it now if people really want to. I didn't prepare anything, but it is an ongoing concern of mine.
I'm okay to wait. The topic is something I'm also concerned about. So putting it on the agenda every time keeps me here every single time.
Any week now, I'll have more free time.
Yeah, that's good to know, David. So we know how to keep you here.
There's irony somewhere in there that discussion of calcification is what keeps David continuing to be engaged.
So we never talk about it, right? Like we just put it on the agenda.
We have a bunch of things that keep popping up in SIG-Node related to that. I think the latest one, I think, was permissions of the logs that are archived by the kubelet. So I think it'll be good to discuss this topic.
Yeah, I'm Ronald. The SIG-Node stuff and Containerd was what prompted my concern there, but it is certainly not exclusive.
Yeah.
Okay, well, sounds like that's a topic for another day. So thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, bye, everyone.
Bye. All. Take care.